Welcome to The Right Atmosphere, podcast for writers, brought to you by Atmosphere Press, the only publisher that puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. I'm your host, Hayla Alawi. On this episode, we'll be talking about the importance of branding for authors with our guest, Gabi Coatsworth. Gabi is a British-born author, speaker, and blogger who has spent half her life living in the United States. She's published by Atmosphere Press, and her award-winning debut novel, A Beginner's Guide to Starting Over, has readers loving the friendly ghost featured in it. The sequel, A Field Guide to Library Ghosts, is due this fall and has a supernatural element too. The ghost, of course, insisted. Her memoir, Love's Journey Home, came out in 2022 and has also won several awards. If she's not writing or traveling, she'll be in her flower garden, wondering whether to weed or relaxing with a book. Thank you so much for joining me, Gabi.
Hello, it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, of course. It's always great to get your insights on various aspects of publishing, and particularly today, as a multi-book author and particularly as a frequent speaker, I know that you're very familiar with this idea of branding for authors, for better or for worse. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you. And I'm wanting to start off by asking, why is branding important for authors?
There are a ton of authors out there, and it's always a good idea to try and stand out from the crowd. Sometimes you might have a name that's similar to somebody else's name. Sometimes you might wonder why your books aren't registering with people. So branding is not very complicated. You don't have to be you don't have to be CBS, you don't have to be anything huge, but something that conveys your personality and that helps a reader decide, oh, yeah, well, I might want to read her book or his book.
Yeah, we were just talking before this about SEO on Google, and luckily for both of us, because we have rather unique names, if you search our names, they're going to come up pretty much immediately on Google. But, if you have a name that you might inadvertently share with another author, I can imagine setting yourself apart in some other way becomes a necessity to be able to be found. So I'm curious to hear then, what made you decide that you needed a brand of your own?
It was almost accidental. I began to notice that people who talked about me referred to the fact that I was British. People would often say, gosh, you wear a lot of blue. I deliberately wore pink today to go outside, but you notice my spectacles are blue and my
Yeah.
fingernails are blue. So those are sort of my brand colors, if you like. And one way that, and so that was accidental. That was who I actually was. But I found that it was a shorthand way for people to identify me. Now, we're sort of discouraged in society from using shorthand to describe people, but being British doesn't seem to fall into the category of things that, are tricky. And I am very British, although I've been here for so many years. My writing even has a little British tone to it, which I'm always trying to even out for American readers. But what I did when I started was to ask my friends, when they thought of me, what did they think of? And I wanted my friends specifically because I did not want my enemies to contribute to this. But so they said, my sense of humor, the fact that I was British, the fact that I was a writer, and the fact that I had this peculiar sense of humor. So I thought about it as I developed my brand, including things as simple as my bio. I try to convey those things in there. And being British seems to include things like drinking tea constantly and gardening and things like that, which are nice things to include in the bio for my kind of book. If you're writing serious books about how to manage stress or something similar, nonfiction books, you might choose different aspects of your personality to convey the fact that you're a writer that knows what they're doing and the reader will be in safe hands with you.
Yeah, I love this idea of asking, well, specifically your friends, maybe not your enemies, to contribute to designing that because I mean, I'm even thinking of something as ubiquitous as writing your bio when you're, putting it in a book or in something that's about to be published. And suddenly, when you have to boil down your existence to 80 to 120 words, it seems impossible. So it totally makes sense that you would kind of crowdsource what are the highlights that stand out to these other people. And you know, kind of feeding into that, there are these tiny little things that you might not consider, these little sentences in the author bio, and that's all part of it. Were there any other aspects of your author brand that you had to deliberately design to, tailored to yourself? Anything unexpected or anything like that?
When I was starting out, most of my writing credits were short stories or creative nonfiction articles. I didn't have any published books, but I needed a bio because whenever something did get published, the bio would accompany it, and I was trying to make sure that people would remember who I was. The minute I got an award, I added award winning right in front of British author. And I would say to people that that's a good reason for submitting something to a contest. There are many contests out there, and many of them don't charge, but some of them charge a little amount. But if you win something, you're immediately award winning. So add that to your bio. And then in the early days, I was putting, she has been published in such and such a journal and so on and so on. And she runs groups for writers in Connecticut, all those things that seem to tell people what I was like as a writer. That was before I had my memoir out and my novels out. Having a memoir out gave me a slightly different slant because I was trying to say, yes, I'm a lovely person and this is about my life. Um, when I had to add my fiction, it was, I'm still a lovely person, but this is about the lovely people I'm writing about also. So I have a file that I keep updated all the time with different lengths of bios and bios for different purposes, but they all start with Gabi Coatsworth is an award-winning British writer who has spent half her life living in the United States. So that's part of my brand, it's part of who I am. And that doesn't change, but what I've been doing might change somewhat.
Right. So, there are some things that kind of remain true and some things that might have to get adjusted. So, are you ever finding that you have to modify your branding as you become more established as an author? And how do you approach that without feeling like you're becoming, wishy-washy or just, you're kind of losing that core central part of it?
Right. So I try to stick with a one-line description. I've come up with a one-line description, which I've just mentioned. The other thing I do is I developed a series of colors that I use when I'm putting things up on social media, especially things like events or book announcements, or this is the new cover for the next book, those kinds of things. Having a consistent color makes it easier for people who are trawling through, pages and pages of stuff to go, oh yeah, it's her again. Rather like you at Atmosphere Press, have a kind of a teal color with some other accents to it. But whenever I see the teal coming up in my emails, I go, oh yeah, it's Atmosphere, emailing me. It helps to fix it helps to have a visual that people can fix in their minds. And when you're talking about different books or different events, the visuals can change. If the colors remain consistent, that really helps with your branding. Another thing to have is a consistent headshot, which you can keep for quite a long time. I recently replaced mine, but it's similar to the one I had before. Again, people recognize it. And things like that, like a headshot, have to be visible at when they're quite small. If you think about getting a Gmail from me, you'll see my little face there, and it still looks, you sort of go, oh, it's Gabi, you know, without having to read any further. That's what you want. You want people to recognize that it's you when you're wanting to talk to them.
Absolutely. I love, thinking of those visual cues because that's obviously at the center of so much branding, whether you're, one author and this is a one person show that you're kind of running yourself, or if it's a huge company, everyone can picture like the Best Buy logo, for example.
Well,
Those big sort
Coca-Cola's
of,
classic, right? It's
yeah.
kept the same font and the red with the white for, what is it? I don't know, nearly 100 years or something. And
Yeah.
so we recognize it at a distance, even if we can't read Coca-Cola, we recognize the shape and the color and so on.
Exactly. And it's really good to know, you've got these static elements that stay consistent, but that also gives you that flexibility as you grow and develop as an artist, as authors are doing. Before we say goodbye to our guest, I'm happy to say that this episode is brought to you by Atmosphere Press, the only publisher that puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. Founded in 2015 by an author and PhD in literature and devoted to serving authors through editorial, design, publication, and promotion, Atmosphere has sold tens of thousands of copies of their authors' books across 6 continents. Visit atmospherepress.com to sign up for Atmosphere's newsletter, The Launchpad, and to learn about submission opportunities, event news, and free book, publicity, and writing residency giveaways. So, Gabi,
Yes.
where should our listeners go to learn more about you and what it is that you do?
Well, they can check my branding if they want on my website, or they can Google, anybody who Googles my name, Gabi Coatsworth, will find me, because I'm lucky it appears whenever you Google it. And my website is gabicoatsworth.com. So if you go there, you'll see how I'm conveying my brand, and you'll find all the links to my social media. Everything is under Gabi Coatsworth, so luckily for me.
Yeah, that's perfect. And definitely, I think everyone should go check it out because it's a beautiful website and a great example when you're thinking about how to create your own author brand. But for
Thank you.
now, thank you again, Gabi, and thank you to all the listeners for tuning in. We're so excited to see you on the next episode.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Right Atmosphere, the Advice for Writers podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and share this podcast with the writers in your life. And if you're ready to take the next step in your publication journey, visit atmospherepress.com to submit your manuscript for publication consideration or to learn more about writing and what it is that we do. I'm Hala. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.